So let's build the future together. Let's remember who we are. We are the United States of America.
How Biden's management of the U.S. deficit could shape his campaign. As the first presidential debate approaches, the economy and U.S. deficit will be critical topics. Today, we dive into how Biden's management of the U.S. deficit could shape his campaign. The national deficit has always been a contentious issue, with various administrations grappling with how to balance spending and revenue. Understanding the implications of current deficit trends and the political strategies surrounding them is essential for grasping the broader picture of Biden's economic policies and their potential impact on his re-election bid. Current state of the U.S. deficit. An expert from Yahoo Finance, Rick Newman, recently discussed the latest deficit outlook.
Well, I looked at the latest debt outlook that the Congressional Budget put out this week. This hardly ever makes headlines anymore, but look, the budget outlook only gets worse. It never gets better.
The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, recently updated its outlook, revealing a concerning trend. The U.S. deficit for 2024 is projected to reach $1.9 trillion, up from $1.5 trillion earlier this year. This increase signals growing fiscal challenges that the current administration must address. The consistent rise in the deficit highlights the complexity of managing national finances, especially in a politically polarized environment. The CBO's projections underscore the gravity of the situation. In February, the deficit was anticipated to be $1.5 trillion, but recent updates show a significant increase to $1.9 trillion. This shift can be attributed to various factors, including increased government spending, lower than expected revenues, and unforeseen economic challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic. The widening gap between income and expenditure poses serious questions about the sustainability of current fiscal policies. Biden versus Trump on the deficit. Biden and Trump are trading blows over this issue. Biden criticizes Trump's tax cuts for the wealthy, claiming they would add $4 trillion to the national debt. Trump, on the other hand, argues that Biden's spending policies are worsening the situation. Biden. Trump's tax cuts are a giveaway to billionaires and millionaires. They will add trillions to our national debt. Trump. Biden's reckless spending is driving our country into deeper debt. We need fiscal responsibility, not more taxes. This exchange highlights the fundamental differences in their approaches to economic policy. Biden emphasizes the need for higher taxes on the wealthy to generate revenue and reduce the deficit, whereas Trump focuses on cutting taxes to stimulate economic growth, believing this will ultimately lead to increased revenue through higher economic activity. These contrasting viewpoints illustrate the broader ideological divide between the two parties on fiscal policy. Biden's plans and challenges. Biden has pointed to his plans, which include tax increases on the wealthy and corporations. However, these proposals have faced significant hurdles, even when Democrats controlled Congress. A graphic of Biden's tax plan could highlight proposed tax rates for high-income individuals and corporations. Despite control of Congress, Biden struggled to pass these tax increases. The political landscape makes it difficult to implement such measures. For instance, attempts to increase the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28% were met with resistance not only from Republicans, but also from moderate Democrats. The Biden administration's plan to increase taxes on individuals earning over $400,000 annually and on corporations aims to address income inequality and generate additional revenue. However, these proposals have been met with significant opposition, reflecting the deep divisions in Congress. The failure to pass comprehensive tax reforms highlights the challenges Biden faces in implementing his economic agenda. In addition to opposition within Congress, Biden's plans face criticism from various interest groups and economic analysts. Opponents argue that higher taxes could stifle economic growth, reduce investment, and lead to job losses. Proponents, however, contend that the additional revenue is necessary to fund essential services, reduce income inequality, and ensure long-term fiscal sustainability. This ongoing debate underscores the complexity of balancing economic growth with fiscal responsibility. Impact of student debt cancellation. Adding to the deficit, Biden's cancellation of $150 billion in student debt this year has further increased the national debt. Breaking down the student debt cancellation figures shows the magnitude of this decision. While beneficial for many Americans, this decision has sparked debate about its long-term economic impact. Critics argue that the cancellation adds a significant burden to the national debt, while supporters claim it provides much-needed relief to millions of borrowers struggling with financial instability. The decision to cancel a portion of student debt reflects Biden's commitment to addressing the student loan crisis, which has burdened millions of Americans. However, the move has significant fiscal implications. By adding $150 billion to the national debt, the cancellation exacerbates the deficit issue, prompting debates about the trade-offs between immediate financial relief and long-term fiscal responsibility. Supporters of the debt cancellation argue that it will provide economic stimulus by increasing disposable income for borrowers, who can then spend more on goods and services, boosting the economy. They also highlight the potential for improved mental health and financial stability among borrowers. Critics, however, warn that the move sets a precedent for future debt relief efforts, potentially encouraging further borrowing and increasing moral hazard. The political reality. Washington is filled with politicians who give lip service to solving the deficit problem, but few are willing to take action. The reason is simple. Voters would punish them if taxes went up or benefits were cut. Rick Newman explains, politicians avoid making tough decisions because they fear voter backlash. No one wants to be the one to raise taxes or cut benefits. This political reality creates a stalemate where meaningful deficit reduction becomes almost impossible. Past efforts to reform entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare have faced immense opposition from both sides of the aisle. The reluctance to address the deficit stems from the potential political costs. Raising taxes or cutting benefits are unpopular measures that can lead to electoral defeat. As a result, politicians often opt for short-term solutions that avoid immediate backlash but fail to address the underlying issues. This avoidance perpetuates the cycle of increasing debt and delayed reforms. For example, efforts to reform Social Security and Medicare have historically faced significant opposition. Proposals to raise the retirement age, reduce benefits, or increase payroll taxes have been met with resistance from both the public and politicians. The fear of voter backlash and the potential for losing political office make it challenging to implement necessary reforms, even when they are crucial for long-term fiscal health. Inflationary implications. There are also inflationary concerns. Despite fears that high levels of debt would cause market turmoil, the market has continued to absorb more U.S. debt than ever anticipated. A graph of inflation rates alongside increasing national debt can illustrate this issue. Markets have absorbed more U.S. debt than expected, but this has inflationary implications that can affect everyday Americans. Higher national debt levels can lead to increased borrowing costs and inflation, which erodes purchasing power and can lead to higher interest rates on mortgages and other loans. The relationship between debt and inflation is complex. While the market's ability to absorb U.S. debt has mitigated immediate concerns, the long-term implications include potential inflationary pressures. As the government borrows more, the increased supply of debt can drive up interest rates, leading to higher costs for consumers and businesses. This dynamic poses a significant challenge for policymakers balancing economic growth with fiscal responsibility. For instance, higher levels of national debt can lead to increased inflation if the government continues to borrow and spend without corresponding increases in revenue. This inflationary pressure can reduce the purchasing power of consumers, making goods and services more expensive. Additionally, higher interest rates can result in increased costs for borrowing, affecting everything from mortgages to business loans, potentially slowing economic growth. The market's role. The market is enabling poor fiscal habits. It will eventually force a solution, but until then, politicians are unlikely to take action. A timeline showing the increase in U.S. debt and market reactions over the past 20 years highlights the market's tolerance for U.S. debt, which has surprised many experts. Eventually, however, there will be a tipping point. As Rick Newman notes, The market's tolerance for U.S. debt has surprised many experts. Eventually, however, there will be a tipping point. The market's role in sustaining high levels of debt underscores the interplay between fiscal policy and financial markets. While investors have continued to buy U.S. debt, providing the government with necessary funding, this trend may not be sustainable indefinitely. The tipping point, when the market's tolerance is exceeded, could prompt a sudden and severe economic adjustment, forcing politicians to confront the deficit issue directly. For example, if investors lose confidence in the government's ability to manage its debt, they may demand higher interest rates to compensate for the perceived risk. This could lead to a sharp increase in borrowing costs, forcing the government to implement austerity measures or seek external financial assistance. Such scenarios have played out in other countries, highlighting the potential risks of unchecked borrowing and fiscal mismanagement. Long-term outlook. Experts joke that it might take until 2100 or beyond before a president finally addresses this issue. Rick Newman humorously suggests maybe a president in 2050 or 2075 will finally tackle the deficit. It's a problem for the future. The market will eventually force politicians to act, but when remains uncertain. This long-term outlook reflects the deeply entrenched nature of the deficit issue in American politics. The humorous take on the long-term outlook underscores the persistent nature of the deficit problem. Despite acknowledging the need for reform, political and economic realities often delay substantive action. The eventual market-driven solution may come at a high cost, highlighting the importance of proactive fiscal management to mitigate future crises. This long-term perspective emphasizes the need for sustainable fiscal policies that balance short-term political considerations with long-term economic health. While it may be politically expedient to defer tough decisions, the consequences of continued inaction could be severe, affecting future generations and the overall stability of the economy. Conclusion. As Biden campaigns for re-election, his handling of the deficit will be a key issue. Will voters hold him accountable, or will the deficit continue to grow unchecked? The outcome of this debate will significantly influence the direction of U.S. economic policy and the nation's fiscal health. Biden's approach to managing the deficit will be scrutinized by both supporters and critics. His ability to navigate the complex political landscape and implement effective policies will be crucial in addressing the nation's fiscal challenges. The upcoming election will serve as a referendum on his economic leadership and the broader debate over how to achieve sustainable fiscal health. Biden's re-election campaign will likely highlight his efforts to manage the deficit and promote economic growth. However, his opponents will use the growing deficit as a key talking point, questioning his fiscal responsibility and ability to deliver on his promises. This debate will shape the narrative of the election, influencing voter perceptions and potentially determining the outcome. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this.